Schema development and preparing to read. The whole idea of schema began with a theorist named Sir Frederick Bartlett, and his research began with Native American folk tales, and he was asking participants to recall information from those folk tales. He began replacing unfamiliar information with more familiar information, and what he found was that inferences went beyond the text more often. So this became the beginning of the developing of the theory of schema. Schema is mental structures that represent an individual's generic knowledge of the world. So through schema, our old knowledge influences new information. So to have an idea of this, take a second and read through this description that's listed on this slide. As you're reading through, think about how you could best recall this later. So now take a moment, close your eyes, and try to recall as much information, or look away from the paragraph and try to jot down as much information from the description that you can remember. My guess is that it's not as easy to remember all the fine details. But if you had this visualization that you see on the screen, then if you saw the picture before reading the paragraph, you have a better mental model of what you're reading. And so after seeing this picture, then reading this paragraph makes more sense to your to the mental image in your mind, and you're able to recall that better. So schema is important, and if you think of the picture as schema, then it begins to serve a structure of structures information, and then you can select and it'll help you to select information to remember. Without such a structure or a model in our mind, then it's hard for us to get back to those specific details and recall. So for this activity, take a moment and read through this procedure. I want you to think about, when you're reading this, what is happening here? What is this procedure? And keep in mind that this is a procedure that is very common and that you have probably done many times. So the procedure is doing laundry. Now what I want you to think about is, how does schema relate to the reading? So this procedure might seem odd to you, it may be confusing, it may not fully make sense until you relate it, connect it to the mental model or the schema you already have in your mind, which is doing laundry. So if I would have introduced this procedure before you read this paragraph of saying you're going to read a paragraph about doing laundry, then when you read through the procedure, it would make more sense to you because you had a mental model to connect the information to. So a specific definition of schema is listed here. Keep in mind, we have schemas about ourselves, We have them about things that happen in the world, events that happen in the world. For instance, how we behave in a classroom is set up because we build schema. How we act when we go into different types of restaurants, whether that's fast food, whether that's a nicer sit-down restaurant. You behave, all your actions and the way you behave is based on your schema. It's your mental model of what you know from what's happened prior or what you've been told happens. So now, how does schema development relate to teaching reading? Well, in 1977, Richard Anderson was an educational psychologist, and he took Bartlett's work and he began to relate this to the reading process in education. He said our old knowledge or prior knowledge might influence how we gain new knowledge. And he immediately applied this schema theory to the reading process. And that was a big difference in how we began to teach reading. So reading is a bottom-up process, meaning we learn sounds, we learn letters, we learn words, sentences, and so forth. But it can also be connected to top-down knowledge. So we can construct representations of text based on that schema. Both can be happening. One really key part to schema is prior knowledge. So if we have some prior knowledge that has been misinterpreted or distorted, then that can really affect our schema. Also, if we have insufficient schema, so it's not fully developed schema about a process or a topic, then that would leave us lacking as well. And so our role as teachers is to begin to understand what schema our students have and then build their schema or fill in the gaps of their schema accordingly, because they're going to understand the information so much better if they have sufficient schema. Just like the examples earlier in this presentation worked for you. Now, prior knowledge can also be connected to how we assess. And so to help us understand what our students have related to prior knowledge, we can assess it in a list of ways. So there are 4 ways that are listed here. In list group label, this can be used to review information at the end of a chapter or brainstorming activities that can go well when students have shared a set of experiences. When students do not share a set of experiences, such as with language learners, you can introduce an activity for building instead of activating prior knowledge. So that would be a big difference here of do you need to build prior knowledge or activate prior knowledge? With graphic organizers, they do build prior knowledge, they activate vocabulary, and they are a great way to show relationships between concepts. So we go past learning to our past learning to new learning, and we do it in a visual way. They are more powerful when students are involved in creating them because the students are very connected to the details on the organizer. In reading, viewing, listening, consider adding reading to textbooks, viewing images or videos, podcasts, anything that can connect the whole idea of viewing and listening to reading. In writing, think about how students must reflect on what they know, select what to use, and then organize ideas when they write. So prior knowledge plays a really key role in the whole concept of writing. When we write what we know, we begin to understand what we do not know. So free writes or think writes, even in math and science classes, can help us begin to understand the difference between what we know and what we don't quite understand. Another one not listed on here is anticipation guides, and that contains a series of statements related to what students already know and new material. It can activate prior knowledge, but also motivate our students to read further. Remember, these are always used prior to students reading. That's an important part of it. So putting in information without a connection to prior knowledge will often leave your students guessing about the topic or guessing about the knowledge that's being shared.